When something bad happens, what do? How do you get through it? And we found that there were basically like 3 responses. The thing can break you, you can bounce back from it, or somehow you get better, wiser, and stronger. What we discovered was that third group was no more resilient than anybody else. Their level of resilience didn't predict whether they got better and stronger in a crisis. This adage of what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, it's actually not scientifically true. People who have had more challenges in their lives, they sometimes learn how to suck it up and get through them, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're more resilient. One of the ways we become shatterproof is we focus on our 3 hardwired human needs. And one of them is
an entrepreneur straight out of New York City, Michael Chernow. What's cracking?
I am super excited you're here. I love the topic of resilience, which I know you focus a lot on. Self-awareness is something that I have really been focused on for probably the better part of the last decade, trying to turn the volume up on that self-awareness barometer.
Big fan of self-awareness.
Yeah. Like I know that you did a big TED Talk on self-awareness. Let's just start with what the fuck is self-awareness?
Okay, so I've been researching this topic now for more than 12 years, empirically, scientifically. And I went into it thinking, a definition of self-awareness should be very easy to come by. And it took our research team of 10 people almost a year to scientifically define it. So this is basically simplicity on the other side of complexity, if that makes sense.
Got it.
So self-awareness is the will and skill to understand who we are and how other people see us.
Wow. I feel like those are 2 very, very conflicting ways of thinking though, right? Like who we are and how others perceive us or receive us is it in that succession? First understanding who we are and then being mindful of how others perceive us?
So there's a great F. Scott Fitzgerald quote that I think is like a good preface to this, which is the definition of true intelligence is the ability to hold 2 opposing ideas in our mind at the same time and retain the ability to function. So this idea that both things are true, right? It's not that who I am and how I see myself is more valid than the way other people see me. Both of those things sort of operate continuously. And what we found in our research is that the most self-aware people are able to take in both types of information and balance them, especially when they conflict.
Wow. So someone who is very self-aware, define or describe that person.
So someone who is self-aware, who has both types, right? So I'll start with that kind of internal piece, which is what we mostly think of when we think of self-awareness. They're clear on their values. They know their passions, like what lights them up. They know what they want to accomplish and experience in their lives. They know, they understand their patterns of behavior. Like, when this happens, I tend to do this. And then kind of going to the outer side, they know their strengths and their weaknesses, and they know how to read a room. They understand, what is it that people are saying about me when I'm not around? And how do other people experience me in good and bad ways? And what's interesting is it doesn't necessarily mean that they are always perfect, but having that ability to, having the habit, for example, to get feedback on a continuous basis, or to be in a conversation at a dinner party and realize like the other person is tuning out. Those are all examples of what self-aware people do. I think at the end of the day, it's a curiosity to understand ourselves clearly, completely, and compassionately.
So you can be a total asshole self-aware person, and you could be a total teddy bear self-aware person.
There is a term that I use called aware, don't care. And
Oh my God,
Everybody
I love
knows
that
that
one.
person, right? They're like, I'm just being myself. I'm just saying. I'm just being me. And what's interesting is that it seems like it fits the profile, but what we also know about self-awareness is people who fit the criteria that we use are good at perspective taking. They're very empathetic. They're very humble. So the aware don't care person sort of masquerades as a self-aware individual, but obviously, they don't get any of the benefits that people with self-awareness enjoy. Like, people find them insufferable. It's almost more annoying when someone knows, like, I'm just being an asshole, but I'm going to say this anyway, right?
Yeah, because I think when you would say someone's self-aware, they have like a filtration system, right? Like, I would almost think of someone self-aware, and honestly, I've been really working on this for myself a lot for a long time, but they slow down a lot more, right? They're able to like be dealt a pool of pain and suffering and fire, and they're able to just be like, okay,
Yep.
like, this is what I'm dealing with now, right? Whereas some other people that would self-proclaim them as self-aware have no filtration system, right? And say whatever comes to mind. Mm-hmm. And maybe they would even potentially wear that on their sleeves and say, yeah, I just don't care. I do think that there is an issue with being flagrant, right? I think that there's an issue with being flagrant. And I've worked with a lot of people, and I'm friends with people that, and the reason why I'm talking about this asshole piece is because I do think that there is a level of accountability that we've just gotten comfortable with, as a society. And, and he'll kill me for saying this, or maybe not. He probably won't, because he really, I believe, doesn't actually care. But my former business partner, Daniel Holzman, who's actually my best friend, is an asshole that really doesn't care. Mostly in work environments and work situations, but like, how would you coach someone like that?
So that sort of preamble made me think of something you said on a recent podcast that has really stuck with me, which is the power is in the pause, right? And I've spent the last 20 plus years coaching CEOs and senior executives. And usually the profile is the exact profile that you mentioned.
Aware, don't care.
Well, sometimes they're not even aware, right? They think they're waking up every day and like doing the best they can, and the impact they're having on the people around them is very different than usually what they intend. I get some aware don't cares, but to be honest, I don't prefer to coach people like that, because unless you can sort of help them see the way they're getting in their own way, which I'll come back to, they don't have a lot of motivation to change. But typically what I do to give anyone that motivation to change is, so I'll give you an example. I'm coaching a CEO right now who large growing company, and I interviewed 40 people that he works with and lives with and is friends with, and really to say, how is this person showing up? And what we discovered pretty quickly was not just at work, but in his personal life, he was highly, highly reactive. So super nice guy. The first time I met him, I was like, wow, this is really surprising what all this feedback is. But what I see a lot is under stress. That's when people are unable to pause, and they're unable, and I struggle with that myself, to be honest. And so when I'm coaching an executive, it's about saying, okay, is this how you want to show up? Is this what you want people saying about you? Maybe if you changed a couple things, and you don't have to overhaul your personality, but maybe let's pick one thing that you're going to try to do better or differently. And in this case, it was empathy. And he found that if he paused with empathy when he was, speaking to somebody that was the stupidest person he had ever met, right? And he would say, this person is doing the best they can. This person might just have a different style than me. This person is actually trying to do their job well. That's kind of an example of where if you show people, this is how people see you, and this is what it's getting you, and then make that small pivot, right? Not changing their personality overnight, amazing things can happen. And I actually, I'm so confident in that method, and I've been using it for so long that I have a money-back guarantee. So if my clients don't change as quantitatively rated by their stakeholders, I will theoretically write them a check back. I've never had to do it because good client selection and good process. But my theory at the end of the day is most people just want to have a positive impact on the people around them. Mm-hmm. There are the aware don't cares, and I think they're maybe in the minority, but most people are just trying to do the best they can, and they need a little bit of help.
So you believe in the ability for people to truly change?
Can people change? Yes. Will people change? Maybe. It depends on their level of commitment. It depends on the amount of pain they're experiencing as a result of their current approach. But absolutely. I mean, one of the things we studied in our self-awareness research program were these people that we named self-awareness unicorns. And they were people who started out as, just completely blind to kind of who they were and how they were impacting people, and were able to, through this sort of process that we examined, become really self-aware. So not only do I believe it, but scientifically and empirically, like we've demonstrated it.
I think, so I come from the world of, my life really didn't start. It theoretically started when I was born, but I'd like to think that my current day life really didn't start until I got sober.
Yeah.
And I've been sober now for a little over 21 years. And in that process, I have encountered so many people that I had nothing but optimism for them in potentially changing, right? My grandmother, when I was a young kid, my father was a really difficult guy, and my grandmother was his mother, and she was not a difficult person. She's the most influential person in my life.
Oh, wow.
And I used to call her when I would have these blowouts with my dad. And she used to say to me all the time, Michael, here's the mantra. Bless you, change me. Bless you, change me. Mm-hmm. It's such a mantra that's such a powerful mantra in my life that I actually have it tattooed on my arm here.
That's a serious mantra.
It's a serious mantra. And what I learned from that mantra is that it'd be remiss of me to give up hope on people changing. I'd love for my mother to change her ways in specific areas in her life. I spent years trying to figure out how to do that. And I've just run up against brick walls. So what ultimately happens is, does that make me less self-aware? Potentially, that I'm thinking that I have this ability to shake somebody into a different person. But what it has done, the mantra specifically, has given me an opportunity to say, hey, you know what? You don't have to run from this person. You just have to change how you perceive them, right? And that turns the self-awareness barometer up, So I think and you're an expert on this, but self-awareness is not a linear path, right? Sometimes you got to turn it up. Sometimes it's all good at a moderate level, and sometimes it's super low, and you have to manually increase it, right?
Yes. And I think you're bringing up a really good point. There's a difference between a professional coach and, a friend or a son, right? Or anybody, or a partner. And one of the things I always say when people ask me, I understand that I'm supposed to be self-aware, but how do I make other people more self-aware? Is I say something similar, which is, again, can you make people more self-aware? Yes. unless, like in my case, I am being paid to tell these very, very powerful, very senior people the truth and to bother them and to hold them accountable and make that change because they want to. Right. And that's a very different situation than what I think a lot of us experience with the unself-aware people in our lives, which is like, dear God, I just got off the phone with my mother and why can't she be more self-aware? And so what I tell people is something very similar to what to your mantra, which is take that energy and put it into you. Put it into your self-awareness, put it into your reactions. There's a trick that I learned actually from the least self-aware boss I ever worked for. And I kind of made it up out of pure survival and necessity, and I call it the laugh track. And basically, so remember like in old sitcoms, like The Mary Tyler Moore Show was one of my favorite shows when I was growing up, and I watched it on Nick at Night, and Lou Grant was this like awful boss, right? He was so mean to Mary, and there were all these zany situations. But what was so interesting was when the laugh track came on after something, horrible that he would say, it became endearing. It became funny, lighthearted. And so I actually started with this boss. This was ages ago, like 15 years ago. I started picturing a laugh track behind all of the ridiculous, unself-aware, cruel things that he used to say. And I can't say that, it changed everything, but it was an immediate reframing that I still use to this day. So
you kind of envision or manifest a laugh track after he said something horrible.
Exactly. And then I'd be like, oh, you, instead of going and crying in my office, which is what I did before I discovered that little trick.
You also you developed a number of different tools, but what is the 222? Like, is that when you're delivered something that is difficult, you have an opportunity to like apply this tool and not wallow in the sorrow of what's been delivered?
So this is actually a tool that I developed in the context of my new book, Shatterproof. And one of the premises of this book is that our resilience is not an unlimited resource. As much as we have been taught to believe that we can like infinitely endure the hard things that happen, we all have a ceiling at the end of the day where like we're fine, we're making it through, and then all of a sudden we are not okay. And that's kind of what the 222 method is designed for. And what it essentially does is you're giving yourself permission to stop valiantly, silently enduring and focus on what you need. So it's basically 3 time periods. The first 2 is, what am I going to do in the next 2 minutes? Mm-hmm. And that's immediate psychological first aid. It's saying, things like if I splash cold water on my face, or if I just take some deep breaths, or if I even say to myself out loud, I am not okay right now. I am completely overwhelmed. But it's doing something to essentially recognize what's going on and try to start to regulate again. 2 hours is you're going to ask yourself, the next time you have 2 hours, it might not be immediately, but sometime in the next 24 hours or so, to say, what can I do in a 2-hour period that's going to just make me a little happier? It might be going to the gym. It might be, for me, it's Netflix on the couch. It might be calling a friend. But it's something that you're doing solely, wonderfully selfishly for you. But I think the last 2 is the most important, which is 2 days. You're going to give yourself permission, whatever is pushing you over the edge, to take a deliberate pause from ruminating, from trying to solve, from agonizing over that problem. And what I've found, even in personally using this, is when I do that, and I as somebody that lives with a chronic illness who's always trying to figure stuff out, like, how do I feel better? How do I fix this? If I give myself that 2 days, when I come back to it, I have a different perspective. I have new energy. I have a little bit more willpower to kind of keep the fight up.
So I have to ask, because I also have a chronic illness, like, how do you do that? How do you turn it off for 2 days if you're in the thick of some sort of a chronic illness flare up?
Let me give you an example. It's a pretty dramatic one. So in my diagnostic journey to eventually understand that I have something called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is a genetic connective tissue disease, I was able to get into this world-renowned clinic, and it's EDS for short, so EDS clinic. And I flew across the country, and I knew, I was like, this is finally going to be it. I've known I had this. I need to get this diagnosis, if not just for insurance, but also for my own personal journey. And I went into the clinic, and they diagnosed me with a garbage can autoimmune disease that I did not have, and then told me that I should really go to a pain seminar that teaches you to ignore your pain.
Wow.
And I stumbled out of this facility like I had no idea what just happened to me. Somehow I made it back to my hotel room. I crawled under the covers. I start hysterically crying. And that was actually when I dreamed up this tool, right? So the 2 minutes, I was like, I need to cry under the covers. Maybe for a little longer than 2 minutes right now. 2 hours, I think I need food. Like I haven't eaten today. I think I need to get like the tastiest Thai food that I could ever imagine in this area. But then for the 2 days, I think people like you and I, we're success focused, we're ambitious, we want to fix things. I said, I'm going to give myself 2 days to not pretend I don't have this illness, but to stop trying to fix the situation. And so, instead of flying home on the plane and getting on the Wi-Fi network and searching for other facilities and, calling people and agonizing over it, I think I watched TV on my iPad, and I went home and I hung out with my friends. And so I think that's what it looks like to pull back for 2 days. You're not necessarily giving up, but you're just giving yourself a little bit of grace. It's so sad, but it makes me feel so good that you just said you got on the plane and you just watched TV. Because every time I fly, I'm like, yes, I can just plow through work. And more recently, because I tend to fly a fair bit, I was like, why can't I just give myself the ability to just do like everybody else on this fucking plane and watch a movie? Yeah.
Why can't I just do that? Do I have to be on my computer doing emails for the whole 6-hour flight? Or can I just be on the plane and watch something, when I get caught in that place that we're talking about with the disease, right? In my case, it's Lyme disease. The symptoms are so sporadic and they're so varied. And, right now, as we're sitting here, I'm in a, not a full-on flare, but in a flare. My heart is bothering me. I've been rubbing my chest all day because I have it shows up there, mm-hmm. My left arm will get cold. It's so hard when you have these weird symptoms that I'm sure you're very aware of and accustomed to not think about the problem, right? Because it's ultimately thinking about the problem. They say as or I like to say as a founder, it sucks when my team shows up with a bunch of problems, right? The goal is that we identify the problem and we always show up with solutions, right? That's the plan, right? If you show up to the meeting with just a shit ton of problems, the whole entire meeting is a defensive meeting, right?
Yeah.
We want offense, right? There's got to be some level of offense. Totally identify the problem. Let's see it. But if the team plays defense all day long, they're not scoring any goals. So let's show up with the problem, but have some solutions. In the case of a chronic illness, it's so hard because in some cases, there's not a solution. There's no cure for the problem,
yeah.
Right? There's a bazillion treatments, but which one is right, which one is wrong. So like I would love to be able to employ that strategy with Lyme, because gosh, man, when they come so hard. You know, they come so hard. And I'm sure anybody listening who has experience with some sort of a chronic illness understands that like when they're there, not only is it hard for you and I, but it's also hard for the people around us.
Yeah.
You know, like my wife is over it and she doesn't want to be over it. She wants to love me and care for me. But like when you're married to someone who does have something like this, it's difficult, you know?
Yeah.
It's
the
difficult.
Disease burden isn't just us. It's everybody who loves us.
The resilience piece. So I'm sure you have a lot of resilience in your life. You're sitting here with me. You've written multiple books. You're a New York Times bestselling author. You're a therapist. You've done a lot of things with this thing, right? So resilience is like your middle name. When you say that well is not endless, like, are you talking about there's like a certain amount of resilience we have in life or in a specific situation?
It's a great question. So like a lot of things, a lot of authors write the book they need at the time. And that was sort of how I came to start writing about resilience and about becoming shatterproof, which is kind of a second, really habit to complement resilience. But during COVID, I think what had been happening in my life with my illness is I was running on adrenaline. And I've had a lifetime of chronic health problems. And the thing with EDS is every test is always normal. And a lot of doctors, understandably, because the tests are all normal, kind of gaslight you or dismiss you. Mm-hmm. And so I had spent my whole life just sucking it up, right? I would say, well, something is very wrong. And I would go to a million doctors and they'd tell me it was fine. And so I'd just say, okay, I guess I have to live with this. Sometimes it would go away, sometimes it wouldn't, but I would just keep trudging on. And I am a 5th generation entrepreneur, so that was in my blood. And that was what I had been taught. I saw it in my mom, who was a CEO and founder. I followed her around. I watched her run a company. And so that was the only thing I knew to get through things, which was to basically, like, with as little complaining as possible, suck it up and get through it. And what happened during COVID was, I was traveling 250,000 miles a year as a coach and a keynote speaker. And all of a sudden, I stopped. And I think there was something about just like the adrenaline crash and the stress and everything that was going on. My symptoms got unbelievably bad, like to the point over the course of about a year where I was completely bedridden. I was still speaking at the time, so that was like towards the tail end of COVID. I would drag myself out of bed. I would spend the night somewhere. I'd give a talk. I'd come back. I wouldn't be able to get out of bed for the next week. But it wasn't just physical, what I was experiencing. I was feeling like, I have all these resilience practices. I do my gratitude every day. I meditate. I, turned to my husband at the time for social support. And I like doubled down on all these resilience practices. And all of a sudden they weren't working. And I was just not okay. And I wasn't not okay because of the physical stuff, because I had really spent a lifetime dealing with it. It was just worse than it had been. I was not okay because I felt like there was something in me that had run out. Mm-hmm. And at the time, strangely, I had started a study, actually in February of 2020. I had just trained a team of about 10 research assistants. And the name of the study was When Bad Things Happen. And so our recruiting was, made much easier by lockdown. So we were talking to people about, like, when something bad happens, what do you do? How do you get through it? And we found that there were basically like 3 responses. The thing can break you. You can bounce back from it, or somehow you get better, wiser, and stronger. And the third group was a very small group. But very long story short, what we discovered was that third group was no more resilient than anybody else. their level of resilience didn't predict whether they got better and stronger in a crisis. And so that led me down into this whole thing where I read 500 articles on resilience, and I discovered that the researchers who have been looking at this since literally the 1950s are like, this can't be your only coping strategy. People have a limited amount of resilience. And going back to your original question, I know this is the longest answer ever, but it's really complex, right? Is some people have more resilience than others in general. And in certain situations, some people have more resilience than others, but we all have a ceiling. So what I experienced during COVID was hitting what we named my resilience ceiling. And it can be it's confusing. It's even like shameful for people like us, right? Like, I've gotten through every other crisis in my life, and all of a sudden I can't get through this. And so, yeah, it was a fascinating experience. I wish I hadn't lived it at the same time, but I think that's the only reason I was able to figure out what was going on.
Why do some people have more resilience than others? Like, is it hereditary?
That's a great question. So there is some research suggesting that there is a hereditary component. It's not, there isn't a consensus about that, but I think there's enough evidence that we can say, like, yes, some people constitutionally are more resilient than others. The other thing, though, is you sort of think about it like almost like a bell curve, but not quite. So if you've had no hardship in your life whatsoever, you're probably not going to be super resilient, although I would argue almost no one is in that position, right? If you've had a kind of a moderate level of hardship, you tend to be a little bit more resilient. But if you're somebody who has lived with a chronic illness, right, who is in a marginalized group, who has had trauma, who has had horrible childhood experiences, this adage of what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, it's actually not scientifically true. People who have had more challenges in their lives, they sometimes learn how to suck it up and get through them, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're more resilient. And so I think there's something I call grit gaslighting, which is where we blame ourselves and others for understandably cracking under a certain amount of stress. And I think the reason, grit gaslighting is bad in general, but one of the reasons it's so bad is that we don't always have complete control over our level of resilience.
So do you think that there are certain people, and I'm just like questioning myself here, right?
No, it's good. Self-awareness.
But I have certainly been resilient in my life, and I am kind of like a self-proclaimed die on the hiller, like I just will. And I'm curious though, if that's just who I am, like, am I self-aware? I mean, am I resilient in like an abnormal way, or am I just fucking faking it? Like, am I actually resilient, or am I just have gotten so good at like dealing with the pain that I don't know any other way?
I can't answer that question for you. That was a similar series of questions that I asked myself during this program. And what I discovered was when our default is sucking it up, at best, we're getting by, right? If sort of all these hardships are coming at us and we're like, it's okay, I got through the day, I'm sucking it up, I didn't fall apart. And I started to wonder, don't we deserve more than that? Don't we deserve more than being like, yes, I lived with Lyme disease today. Good for me. I lived with EDS today. And there's sort of this paradox of the second skill set of becoming shatterproof, which is recognizing our pain and harnessing it to proactively transform. So in resilience, I think, this idea of like, I'm going to power through, I'm going to die on the hill, I'm going to stay on this hill. But maybe there's a different hill Or maybe there's a mountain you want to climb, or maybe you want to go down in altitude, metaphorically, right? And I think we don't even allow ourselves that grace to say, what do I need? Like if I'm in a terrible job and I come home every day and I'm like, yeah, I made it through another day, is an overly simplistic example, but maybe there's a job for me that I'm going to be really happy with. Maybe I need to do something totally different. And those are the stories of the people that I share in Shatterproof, are these people who were like, wait a minute, maybe I don't have to be doing this anymore. Maybe I should actually focus on, what do I need? And is it okay that I'm cracking? Is it okay that I'm breaking? Because it's going to give me data to inform how I can have a better life.
How impactful is habit and routine in this kind of lifestyle? Like, I'm not saying, look, I also should probably say, I've gotten so good at dealing with the pain. My life is pretty damn awesome. Thank God.
Amazing.
And it's not like I walk around, woe is me, because I just don't all the time. Sometimes.
we all have our days.
Yeah, sometimes.
Whether or not we're shatterproof, yeah.
Yeah, but, for me, habit, ritual, routine has been such a monumental piece of my happiness barometer, because if you have a habit, if you have a routine, a string of habits, however you want to classify it, that you do, whether you feel good or feel bad, there's a level of consistency there that makes us feel whole, or at least for me. So, how impactful is it in general when it comes to resilience, habit, and routine? And do you have routines that you do on a regular basis that you could share with us?
Yes. I knew you were going to ask me this question. And I think it's a very profound concept. And here's what I have to offer. I think if they are the right habits, you're golden. I think sometimes we stick to habits that we might have outgrown in the spirit of endurance and resilience. One example for me is, this is kind of maybe something that a lot of people can relate to, is when I was building my business and I was a little bit healthier, I was working 12, 14-hour days. And I was tired, but I was energized. My habit was like, I would work, a certain number of hours. I would take a break for dinner. I would go back to what I was doing. I was writing a book at the time. I was, doing all this stuff. If I had continued that habit, it would have literally killed me at this point. And so I think habits are incredibly powerful as long as we're continually re-examining, is this the right habit for me?
But I kind of think of that more as a lifestyle choice than a habit.
Yeah. Okay. So let's make that distinction. I think that's a good point.
I think because I also was, specifically in the beginning of my career, I lived the lifestyle of what we think of as the hardcore entrepreneur,
right?
Which is working to death, basically. I don't think there's a better way to put it, right? Because if I had continued working the way I was when I opened up my first business, I would probably have had a heart attack and died at this point, because I was working 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, didn't take a day off, right? That, in my opinion, is a true lifestyle choice. And I kind of think of habit as habits are sit on both sides of the tracks, right? I think traditionally we think of habits, when people hear the word habit, they're like, oh, I got to break that habit. I gotta crush that habit. But really, there's the other side of habit, which is the habit that I'm trying to promote, which is better habits, right? Better habits, better life.
Better choices.
Yeah. So, are there things that you do, not things that you do on a daily basis that help propel your resilience?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Maybe that's the ultimate question. Is what habits are giving me more resilience resources versus the habits that I'm stuck to out of obligation. Because I do want to make that distinction. Let me start with the second category. We've all been taught that, if we do all of these resilience practices, and I mentioned some examples of like, I'm going to sit down and write in my gratitude journal for 20 minutes, or I'm going to meditate, or whatever. By and large, those things are going to be helpful most of the time. But where I think we have to be careful with any habit is it ever feeling like piling on instead of providing relief? Mm-hmm. Here's an example. I had a habit that I went to before I got much sicker. I was a Orange Theory Fitness super fan, and I would go 3 times a week, and it was amazing, right? But I outgrew that habit because my body was changing. And so if I had continued, even though that's healthy, that's a resilience practice, working out, it's great for you. But if I hadn't reevaluated that, it would not be a productive habit. So I think that distinction still matters.
It's where the self-awareness comes in.
Yeah, well, and what I always say is I have just as much, if not more, work to do on my self-awareness than the average person. So it always takes me a little longer to discover the answer. But here's one way that I kind of shore up my resilience on a daily basis. And this is kind of a new habit. I put it in my Microsoft To-Do every day. And sometimes it takes less than a minute. And it's called a connection bid. So there's research that shows that the power and quality of our relationships isn't dependent on these huge dramatic acts that we do for each other. It's based on every day kind of reaching out to other people. And when you reach out to that other person, do they accept your bid? Or do they leave your text message unread for 2 days, right? Or do they make you feel small or unheard or unseen? And so what I try to do now once a day, especially because I think living with a chronic illness, sometimes you get so focused on you and just getting through the day that, I don't know, for me at least, I can get too much in myself, is to just reach out to a friend. It's usually a text. Sometimes it's a call, but frankly, who has that kind of time? And I just, I'll send them an article and be like, hey, I read this and I thought of you. So I'm giving them a connection bid. And because I have made some very difficult decisions in my life about who to keep and who are those people that return my bids and kind of help me feel that sense of belonging and connection, it's really been transformational. And it sounds so crazy, right? How could a text of a funny meme that you send someone change everything? But over time, that's how we build and strengthen our relationships.
I'm so happy you say that. I do something very similar where a couple of times a week, I will open up my phone and I'll just scroll, kind of random scroll.
Oh, I love it.
Random scroll. I'll go 5, 6, 7 times, and then boom, I'll land on somebody, and I'll just shoot them a random text and say, hey, just zipping through my phone, your name showed up, shooting you a text, just wanted to check in on you, see how you're doing. And then I'll go the other way 3 times, boom, and I'll do that 5 times. And honestly, it's been so gratifying because I tend to reconnect with people that I haven't spoken to in a long time.
Yeah.
Sometimes it just goes completely blank and no one responds. But
that's data, by the way.
That's smart. That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. But I think that I love that little piece of it takes no time at all. And it's an opportunity to connect. Because I think at the end of the day, realistically, we're love beings, right?
Yeah.
We're love beings. There's not many beings on this planet that are love beings. It's like us, elephants, dolphins, and I think penguins do that.
Oh yeah, definitely penguins.
Penguins.
Yeah.
But there's not many of us in the in the world of wild nature that have the ability to express love and receive it. We're one of them, and because of that, I believe that's kind of our primary purpose in life. And a lot of the decisions that we make, be it good or bad, are in the name of looking for love and or trying to express love. And that's not a topic of conversation much these days, you know.
Well, and you're 100% correct scientifically also. One of the ways we become shatterproof is we focus on our 3 hardwired human needs. And one of them is connection. And there are some researchers that actually argue that connection is our hardest wired, deepest human need.
I would imagine that. Because I do think, I mean, I'm serious when I say I do believe that is like what we were put on the planet to do.
I agree.
You know?
I agree.
Someone picking up Shatterproof and reading the book, like as you were writing it, what were you hoping they would take away from the book?
So my goal in all situations of service is to help people live a little bit better of a life. It's true for coaching, it's true for speaking, it's true for writing. And I think what Shatterproof does, the reason I needed this book and what I hope it's helping other people do, is we live in a world of increasing chaos, complexity, disruption, crisis, challenge, and to try to find a way to stop just getting by in that sort of undeniable world. And by the way, it's not going away anytime soon. I think we can all agree, is to find 1 or 2 ways that you can feel better, do better, live better. That's what it's done for me. And I will say that the process of becoming shatterproof in and of itself is a habit. So we have to choose that every day. But I'm also a pragmatist. If we can choose it 5 days out of 7, 4 days out of 7, I think we're going to live a little bit better of a life.
Is there a way, like, do you think this is like, if you had to break it down to the simplest terms, is this just a conversation that we're having with ourselves basically in the beginning of the day?
Ooh, maybe.
You know, like if you're committing to being shatterproof, what does the act of that look like, you know?
So I talk about in the book a 4-step roadmap, which is probably a couple more clicks down than we have time for today. But the practice of being shatterproof is about harnessing the things that are causing us pain and challenge to get data to understand how to make choices in better service of our happiness and our peace and our success. So what you said is intriguing to me because I wonder, I mean, if we boil this down to like its most fundamental level, the 3 human needs, I mentioned connection. The second is confidence, feeling like I'm doing well, I'm growing, I'm getting better. The third is choice, like I'm living with agency and authenticity. Maybe in the simplest terms, it's waking up in the morning and saying, what's one thing I can do today to feel more confident, choiceful, and connected?
I think that's a great way to wrap this thing up. I mean, because you know, my message for the better part of the last 10 years has been the beginning of your day is the time where you lay foundation, right? Like we get today, yesterday's long gone. Not a single human in history that we know about has ever been able to go back and change it. So it's gone, it's there, it's done, it's history. And tomorrow is not necessarily guaranteed. And I had that thought, you know, it's so crazy. I was walking out of the train station on my way to the podcast studio this morning, and this guy walked down next to me, and he looked really angry, and he had his hand in his pocket, and he was staring at me. And the thought for a second went through my mind, this guy could easily pull a knife out of his pocket and just stab me right now. Like I never think that way. I'm born and raised in New York City. Like I've seen a lot of shit. And I walked by him and I was totally normal and fine, but it was a fleeting thought. Like tomorrow's just not guaranteed. What are we doing today? And I do think that the morning gives us an opportunity to really lay the foundation. Like if you wake up to an alarm and you hit snooze, you've started to lose, right? Like you snooze, you lose is a term because it is real, right? Like once you give up on yourself by pushing that button, it's not like it increases confidence. It's not like it increases your ability of choice. Your choice
Yeah, it's
there,
not a choice.
That's not a choice. That's just like throwing in the towel.
Yeah.
Right? So like I love how you frame that. And for the listener, I think looking for a tactic to take away from this episode. In the morning, ask yourself, what's one way I can be more connected to others today? What's one way that I can be more choiceful today? What's one thing I can do to increase my confidence level?
I think we blew this thing wide open.
Yeah. I am so grateful you came on the show. Let us know where we can follow along on your journey, where people can find you, where they can grab the book.
So I'm easily findable, and what I've learned over the years is it's not about me at all. It's about you guys. And so one thing I would point everyone to is it's a free 5-minute quiz that will tell you how close you are to your resilience ceiling. And the website, I always mess this up, hang on, is www.resilience-quiz.com. So it'll tell you on a couple of dimensions, like how close you are, and then it'll give you a couple of tools and immediate actions you can take.
Wow, that is so cool.
I know, it's pretty cool. We had fun developing it, and people seem to really be finding it helpful.
I love that. So it's resilience-quiz.com.
You got it.
Sick. The book is shatterproof, and people can just find you on social media.
Yes, as much as social media is a blessing and a curse, I am always there.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
For being
It was a
here.
pleasure.
Guys, we talked about resilience, we talked about self-awareness, and those are two topics that are like, those words are used often, but really drilling into them is not something that most people do. Like when you hear the word resilience, you just think of someone that is able to get through shit and come back stronger, right? But you don't really, like, there is science behind it, actually science behind it, which is so, so cool. And, you know, being able to sit down with somebody who's spent years studying this stuff, especially self-awareness. How long did you study self-awareness? 12 years?
And counting.
Pick up the book Shatterproof. You know, I'm like, I've questioned so many things just sitting here listening and how engaged I've been. I'm definitely going to read the book, and I think I'm also going to start asking myself those 3 questions in the morning. How can I be more choiceful? What is one thing I can do today, really one thing I can do to actually increase my level of confidence? And then what can I do to be a little bit more connected to the people in my life? What an episode. I really, really would ask you guys to share this one. Send it to your friend, send it to your mom, send it to your brother, post it on social media. Give us a 5-star rating and a review if you're feeling super generous, and keep listening. Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode, tuning in, being subscribed, all those good things. And until the next one, y'all, peace.